The mop handle creaked in David Carter's hands as he wrung out the last bucket of dirty water. The night shift at the downtown corporate tower was nearly over, and he was bone-tired. His back ached from bending over floors all night, but what wore him down more was the worry. Rent was late again. His daughter Emily needed new shoes for school. And though he'd smiled at her that morning, assuring her everything would be fine, deep down David wasn't so sure. He hung the mop on its hook, wiped his hands on his faded jeans, and reached for his lunchbox. That was when he heard the sound of heels, sharp, confident, echoing down the marble hallway. "Nobody should be here at 4 in the morning. Excuse me," a woman's voice called, crisp yet tired. David turned. She was dressed in an elegant suit, though her hair was loose, almost messy, as if she'd been fighting sleep, or tears. He recognized her face from magazine covers in the break room. Charlotte Hale, the 30-year-old tech millionaire whose startup had bought the whole building 2 years ago. "Ma'am," he said, straightening up. "Sorry, I was just finishing up." She studied him for a moment, longer than polite. Then, in a voice that startled him, she asked, "Will you be my husband for one day?" David blinked. I'm sorry," Charlotte exhaled, pressing a hand to her forehead. "I know how it sounds. Ridiculous. Insane. Even. But I need someone. Just for 24 hours. To stand by me." He frowned. "Why me? I'm a janitor. You could hire an actor, or—" "Because you're not an actor," she interrupted softly. "You're real." David laughed nervously, glancing at his mop bucket as if it might explain what was happening. "Look, ma'am, I've got a daughter at home. I'm not looking for—" "It's not romantic," she said quickly, as though reading his mind. Her voice wavered. "It's personal. There's a charity gala tomorrow night. Everyone will be there, investors, competitors, the press. And my father. He's old-fashioned, controlling. He's been pressuring me for years to marry one of his business partner's sons. To prove I can settle down, and not embarrass the family." She looked him in the eye. "If I show up with a husband, even just for one night, it'll silence him. Give me room to breathe." David's first instinct was to say no, absolutely not. This was madness. But then he remembered the stack of unpaid bills on his kitchen counter. And how Emily's smile had faltered when she saw her shoes falling apart. "I can pay you," Charlotte added quickly, "generously." How generously? Her lips curved, though it wasn't quite a smile. $50,000. David's breath caught. That was more than he made in 2 years of scrubbing floors. Still, the words stuck in his throat. "Why me?" he asked again, softer this time. Charlotte hesitated, then said, "Because you looked at me just now and saw a person. Not a bank account. Not a headline. A person." By the next evening, David barely recognized himself. Charlotte's team had swept him into a whirlwind. Haircut, tailored tuxedo, shiny shoes. When he caught his reflection, he saw not a janitor but a man who might actually belong at a ballroom beside a millionaire. "You clean up well," Charlotte remarked as they waited in the limousine. She looked breathtaking in a midnight blue gown, though her eyes carried the same shadow of weariness he'd seen last night. David adjusted his bow tie, nervous. "I feel like Cinderella. Except I'm waiting for the clock to strike 12 so I can go back to mopping floors." Her laugh was genuine, soft. "Maybe midnight can wait, just for tonight." When they entered the gala, cameras flashed, voices buzzed. "Charlotte Hale, married? Who's the mystery man?" David squeezed her hand instinctively, and she glanced at him with something like relief. For hours, they played their roles. He listened to wealthy investors boast about yachts and vacations. He nodded politely, shared stories about meeting Charlotte in the most unexpected place. Though he omitted the mop bucket, to his surprise, people laughed. They liked him. His simplicity, his warmth, it disarmed them. At one point, Charlotte whispered, "You're better at this than half the CEOs in this room." But then came the moment David realized why she had been so desperate. Her father arrived. Richard Hale was tall, silver-haired, with the kind of presence that silenced a room. His eyes landed on David like a hawk spotting prey. "So," he said, voice dripping with skepticism, "this is the husband you've been hiding?" David extended a hand. "David Carter, sir. Pleasure to meet you." Richard ignored the hand. "What do you do, Mr. Carter?" The room seemed to lean closer. David swallowed hard. He could lie. Say he was an entrepreneur, a consultant, something impressive. But then he saw Charlotte's tense shoulders, the way her fingers twisted her clutch. She had asked for someone real. "I'm a janitor," David said simply. "I clean your daughter's offices at night." A stunned silence. Someone coughed. Cameras clicked. Richard's face darkened. "This is your idea of rebellion, Charlotte? Parading around with a custodian?" "Dad," she said quietly, "this is my life, my choice." "No, it's a joke. You think investors will trust a woman who marries this?" He gestured at David with contempt. "You've humiliated our family." David felt heat rising in his cheeks. Part of him wanted to shrink, to disappear. But then he remembered Emily. How kids sometimes teased her because her dad was just a janitor. He stood a little taller. "With respect, sir," David said firmly, "your daughter doesn't need a man's title to prove her worth. She built an empire on her own. She's the strongest person in this room. If you can't see that, maybe the joke isn't on her." Gasps. Murmurs. A reporter's pen scratched furiously across a notepad. Richard's jaw tightened. But Charlotte's eyes shone with something fierce. Pride, maybe even gratitude. She slipped her arm through David's and said, "Come on, husband. Let's dance." The night blurred into music and laughter. For the first time, Charlotte looked free, spinning across the dance floor, laughing at David's clumsy steps. He laughed too, forgetting for a moment who they were supposed to be. Later, on the balcony, away from the noise, she leaned on the railing. "You didn't have to defend me like that." "Yes, I did," David replied. "You deserved it." She studied him, her expression softening. "Most men I meet want something from me. Power, money, status. You just wanted to tell the truth." He shrugged. "Truth's all I've got." For a long moment, they stood in silence, city lights glittering below. Then Charlotte said quietly, "Maybe I chose the right husband after all." David's heart thudded unexpectedly. But before he could reply, the ballroom doors opened, and cameras flashed again. Reality returned. When the night ended, the limousine dropped him back at his modest apartment. Emily was asleep inside, her stuffed bear tucked under her arm. David stood in the doorway, tuxedo collar loose, holding the envelope Charlotte had given him, $50,000. He should have felt triumphant, but instead, he felt a strange ache. The day had been unreal, like living someone else's life. Yet the moments that lingered weren't the luxury or the applause. It was Charlotte's laugh. The look in her eyes when he spoke up for her. The way she had finally breathed, as though someone had lifted a weight from her shoulders. The next morning, David expected never to hear from her again. Their deal was over. She would go back to her empire. He would go back to mopping floors. But a knock came at his door. When he opened it, Charlotte stood there, no gown, no cameras, just jeans and a sweater. She smiled nervously. "Morning, husband," she said. "I was wondering, would you and Emily like to get breakfast?"